and there was a couple of thieves that just rolled up in there. They had machetes and they freaking locked up the doors, and they were being chased by the cops. And so um, I just remember they like picking me up, and like waving me on the window, like, "Hey, you guys better clear the area because we're gonna hurt him if you guys just don't leave." You know what I mean? And so um, they sat me back down, and they're over here on the window negotiating. I could hear screaming and the background, like this desperate screams, and I didn't know who the hell it was. Like, it's just like sounded like somebody was dying. And even in poverty, even in that state, there's levels to it, where I had parents that lived in the United States. So, my mom would send money, or, shoes or clothing and things like that. My dad sometimes would do the same. And so we weren't completely left without resources, where other kids that I grew up with would struggle more. They'd be out there hustling at an early age, man. You're talking about 8, 9 years old, trying to make ends meet, trying to find a hustle, whatever, to sell food, steal, whatever, to make it happen. And so, I mean, there was a lot of that. You know, I remember when I was going to Park University, and I had a class called Kansas City in the Heartland, and I had such a big realization in that class because we went to the Warno House. I don't know if you guys are familiar
Say
with
that again.
the Warno House.
The Warner House.
Oh yeah, it's like a museum sort of. It's a house that's still intact, back in the Civil War, 1860s or so. But if you go inside the house, utensils, the furniture, everything's still like it was back in the 1860s. I remember walking through this house, looking around and just reflecting on it, thinking they live better here in the 1860s than they do in Guatemala in the current age, and that's how big of a gap you're looking at. Guatemala was challenging in some ways. The in the early days, you didn't have any electricity or sewage. Water was scarce. And poverty's got a certain palpable feel to it, where the smell, the way it feels, it's just it sips through your pores. You know what I mean? It really does. Um, the heat in Guatemala was crazy, man. You'd be cooking, and the houses were made out of aluminum, like the roofs of the houses. So in the middle of the day, it's like a sauna in there, man. So you can't even be inside the house. And there is no escape because there's no air conditioning anywhere. You just kind of have to get accustomed to it. Sleeping was a difficult thing to do at night. Yeah, right, because you're sweating. It's humid. And it was it's that breeze in the evening that just kind of like gives you a little soothing, and you're like, oh gosh. And so you're struggling through the heat all throughout the day, and then that evening, just like it's almost like a high when you feel that breeze, man.
Yeah.
you know but we would find ways, man. We go to the river, we swim. We I played a lot of ball in my early days, on the street barefoot.
Soccer.
Yeah,
Like
soccer. Yeah, I did. We played. all kinds of games, man, and all the kids in the neighborhood. So I have very memorable thoughts from back in those days, especially the early days. Um, Later on, it started getting more dangerous, and some of the stories that my mom shared here are very very real. And you live with that, and it's crazy because you kind of become a little numb to it.
Yeah.
You see it, and it just you know doesn't
Affect you.
affect you at some point. Yeah. I mean, the first time I've seen a dead body, right? And then, it was, because, in Guatemala, kids are supposed to be of service, like, so, hey, go to the store, grab me this, or, and I remember a day that my grandma sent me to go buy some, um, beers, they were having a get together. And whenever you go buy beers in Guatemala, you gotta take the empty bottles in order for you to be able to swap out the case.
Okay.
And so I'm going to the cantina. It's just usually where you go and buy the beers. There's a couple of gentlemen, arguing and whatnot there, and I just see one of them get up. Another one apparently must have shot him, because and you just hear a very like low pop, like almost like a firecracker went
Mm-hmm.
off, but it just didn't sound like a gun. And the man got up and he fell back and he was just laying there. And I get the case of beer that I needed to get, and I'm getting ready to leave, but I gotta walk around this guy, and he's laying there, and the guy didn't have a shirt, right? And I just see this small hole in his stomach. It wasn't even like a lot of blood. It was just drips of blood, really. And so it looked like he had, now look in hindsight, I'm like, he must have gotten shot with a 22,
Yeah.
and the bullet didn't exit. So it must have pierced his lung. He was just probably drowning in his own blood internally. But I just remember seeing him there gasping for air. I dropped the case and broke some beers, pick him up, and I, run back home. And I got my ass beat for that.
For dropping the beers.
Yeah, I never actually even told my grandma that I saw that. You know what I mean?
Oh.
She just thought I tripped and broke the bottles. She never thought but I saw it, but I never talked about it again. I just didn't talk about it. And so you know you you start recollecting your own history, and so a lot of those memories started coming back later on in life. Later on in life.
That was your first time seeing that?
And that was the first time I seen, yes, somebody essentially dying in front of me. That was the first time.
How old was you?
I must have been maybe 9 years old.
So at 9, you still kind of. I mean, well, I speak for most of us.
Mm-hmm.
You still kind of like cartoony. You still like a
Mm-hmm.
kid.
Right.
You still tell things and
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that. What would make you not share that with somebody after your first time seeing it?
I don't know. I just at the time I didn't even really think about it, or I think sometimes your own mind protects you from your experiences, where it's just you tend to just forget, so that you don't have to think about it, and I think that there was a lot of those instances in Guatemala. And it wasn't until here most recently and like in therapy that where I start recollecting a lot of these memories, and trying to make sense of them. But yeah, and so you would have those kind of situations back home where it started getting dangerous, especially like in the early 90s. Early 90s was starting to get really bad because of the MS-13 gang.
Mm-hmm.
They started just kind of migrating towards Guatemala and just picking random towns and establishing territory where they'll go and do the same thing that they would do, right? Which is to start, stealing or, charging for rent and things like
Yeah.
that, so that they don't, go and destroy their businesses or kill people and things of that nature. And I remember vividly, it was like 95. It was like 95. It was a group of about 25 of them that went in the hometown, and they were doing what they do, and it wasn't but a week later that after they started doing that, they all got killed, chopped up, and thrown in the river where we used to go basically swimming at. They even killed the lady that gave them a place where to stay, right? And that's when things have started sort of going south and dangerous, and people will be scared of really going out after certain times, like when darkness falls, you take your
Yeah.
take your ass home, right? When darkness falls, go home. And it was just like kind of a rule of thumb for a lot of people, like, hey, once it starts getting dark, you better start heading home, because you would hear gunshots at a distance, and you'd be sitting there just wondering, who did they get this time? You know what I mean? This is somebody right? But that became frequent. It became frequent, and then the next day you will hear, oh well, such and such got murdered this time and whatnot. And the cartel and things like that. The cartel had been sort of established since before
Yeah.
MS-13 even, but the cartel didn't do those kinds of things either. So they were almost like a necessary evil, because they would clean out the town when things like that started happening. They would go and just basically clean house, you know, and it was back to business as usual again, and but so yeah, it started getting dangerous. I think that it was around that time when my mom was really trying to push for my residency here,
Yeah.
where she just was like really trying to get my papers going and things like that, because she would hear about the stories. And you know but I pay no mind. The Guatemala. One thing about Guatemala, there's the law of the land. It might be there might not be um like the law, like you have here, where you kill somebody, they're gonna investigate and
Yeah.
probably arrest somebody and go through due process and all that. You don't gonna have that in Guatemala, but there is a law, and that's the law of the land. And it's like, if you're not involved in anything bad or doing anything wrong, then you shouldn't worry about anything type of stuff, unless you're like an innocent bystander that happened to be at the wrong place at the
Yeah.
wrong time. And most people knew, to kind of, stay clear certain places, and also, you know, not be out after a certain time, so you can kind of mitigate the risk a little bit. You know what I mean? And so, and everybody, they pretty much teach you to, how to survive, right? Hey, after this time, I want you home, or don't be, stopping by this place, or stay away from that area, or things like that. And even your own peers and people and family and stuff like that, they talk and give heads up, and you hear things throughout the neighborhood and what's going on and how to so it's like I said, it just didn't seem like you were going through it alone. Like, there were other people
Yeah.
also watching out for each other and things of that nature. So yeah, Guatemala was definitely an interesting experience. But yeah, that was not the first time I faced death in a way, you could say, right? It goes way back farther than that. It goes.
Further than the
Yeah, yeah.
22.
The first time I faced death, I wasn't even born yet. I was supposed to be an abortion, essentially. Because my,
Gotcha.
my my father was leaving, and left, and so my mom, it was like kids having kids. You know what I mean? she was like 15 and a half, 16 years old, and so she was scared, and so um, she was going to get an abortion, and it so happens to be that my grandma was a nurse, and the doctor that was going to do the abortion recognized my mom and said, "Does your mom know you're doing this?" And she said no, and so she said, "Well, you better go talk to her." And well, grandma said, "You're having this kid." And so I'm here, and so I'm thankful. I am very thankful for my life. I appreciate my life because I've been through so much that I'm like, holy smokes,
Yeah.
how in the heck do you still stand here at 41 years old after everything you have experienced? And so you can't be anything but grateful for just every day, and every breath you take, man. It's just you can't take it for granted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How'd you you spoke of the river that y'all used to go to, and it being bodies, like them ended up dumping bodies in it and stuff. Did you ever any time after that get to enjoy that river anymore?
We went back to the river. It just had a different feel to it. You knew that there was blood that run through it before. And it's almost like that area where the bodies got dumped. You just wouldn't feel comfortable going back there again. You know what I mean? And it might have been an area where you used to play and have good memories before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it does. Yeah, murder has a way to stain places
Yeah.
in a way where once takes place, it just doesn't feel safe anymore, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, we would find other places in the river to go fishing and so forth. It was quite the experience, man. I tell you. One in particular that I remember, with a friend of mine actually that lived close to my house in the same street.
Mhm.
Um, his dad was involved in some crooked stuff. I don't know exactly. They used to have a shop at the market, and they lived better than most. And I remember one day we were just hanging out up front in the house, and all of a sudden there's just trucks rolling by, one after another, at high speed from a couple different places, and they went straight to his house, and they surrounded his house.
Mhm.
Um, and you just hear gunshots. You just hear gunshots. Shortly after that, one of the shots actually hit our bathroom, because our bathroom was not inside the house; it was outside. And one of the gunshots hit our bathroom, and we're inside. We're at this point we're inside just waiting to kind of waiting it out, to see
Mhm.
what when it will stop. But the story goes that um, my friend was actually hit at home with his mom coming back from the local shop that they had at the market. And when they approached the house and all these trucks and whatnot, they ended up taking them hostage in order to get the man out of the house. He finally came out. They released the kid and the wife, and that guy was never seen again. And actually, shortly after that, my friend, he didn't he wasn't seen in the city, in the town either. They left the town, and you know, never heard of him again. And things like that would happen. I mean, it happened to me.
Yeah.
It happened to me because, my, um, yeah, how I ended up here in the States, and my mom talked a little bit about that, was because of game of poker. you know, it's ironic how life works sometimes, but my grandfather, my step grandfather, I would say, he was he played poker for a living, man. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's what he did. He would go to places and he would clean people out. I don't know how he did it, but it just happened to be playing with the wrong person one time. And this guy was the bodyguard of the local cartel. And the story goes that they were playing, late at night, and he was winning, cleaning this guy out. He didn't want to lose. Like, hey, let's keep on going. Like, give me a chance to win my money back, type of stuff. And you know, he wouldn't let up, man. He just wouldn't let up. And my my step grandfather gets up to go to the bathroom, and his friend followed him in there, and he said, "Hey, when you get out, you're gonna need this because this guy's gonna try to smoke you." You
Yeah.
know. So he comes out, and sure enough, but anticipating it, he pulled first, fired, killed the guy. You know. And so I remember that night I was actually sleeping with my grandma because when he stayed out late, my grandma would, you know, bring me over to that side of the house and have me stay with her. And when he got home, I woke up, and he was shook. I could tell he was shook.
Mhm.
And just mumbling stuff like, I killed him," like. And my grandma was like, "You just drunk, just go to bed," type of stuff. And so he ended up, laying down. And that very following morning, man, there was somebody knocking at the door. Like, hey, they used to call him Canelo. He's like, "Hey, Canelo, you gotta leave town, man. They're already looking for you. They'll find you, gonna smoke you." And so he packed some clothes, and he left. He left. And that's when my mom got the notice, and they were like, she was like, "No, like we can't leave him there. Like we got to get him out of town." So what they told me was that I was going to the capital to get my passport. That was the story. And so, you know, um, my grandma took me to the capital, and my great grandma. Well, I had to say bye to her, but I didn't know it was the last time I was going to see her alive. And so I remember I just said, I'll see you soon, and it was 4 in the morning, man. I mean, we left the very following day at 4 in the morning. Um, and we went to the Capitol. That's where I linked up with the lawyer, and we were in and out of, just places. And this lawyer, in a matter of a week, had my papers ready to go, man. And she was like, "Yeah, yeah, you're ready to travel." And I'm like, I'm going back to my hometown. She's like, "No, no, you're ready to travel to the States."
Mhm.
And I was like, "To the States?" I'm like, "Well, can't go to the States." I'm like, I didn't even say bye to anybody. Like, um, and she's like, "Well, that's between you and your moms." And, I talked to my mom, and I was like, "Mom, I can't leave." Like, you know, I was like, "It's just, I'm not ready." That's what I told her. I'm not ready. And she said, "You should talk to your great grandma." And I remember it was my great grandma that, she called me over the phone, and she said, "Oof, man, that was a rough conversation. Very short, but difficult." She said, "Son, you gotta get on that plane and go to the States. Go out there and make a man of yourself." She's like, it's been a privilege raising you, taking care of you. I loved you like my own. And Malcolm, man, I knew what I had to do. You know, I had to get on that plane and head north. I did. Unlike a lot of other immigrant stories, I don't want to leave home.
Yeah.
I had a very, very joyful childhood. I really did. My great grandma and my grandma, they did a very very good job at raising me and loving me, and I owe a lot of who I am to them. I am the man that I am. I feel because of those initial 14 years of my life, and I'll forever be grateful to her. Rest in peace. Uh, she would have been she would be 26 years since her passing yesterday, and man, it might as well have been yesterday because it just sure feels like it has. Like time hasn't passed like that. You know, but yeah. So I did, and coming to the states, that was a different story. Um, as much as they loved me, they couldn't prepare me for what was to come. You know,
Before you go there,
yeah.
as far as in Guatemala, because I don't want to go back to Guatemala and then
Mm-hmm,
because I want
mm-hmm,
to stick. So when you were taken hostage, right,
mm-hmm.
at a time, was that before your friend or after your friend?
That was before. That was before my
Before
friend.
your
Yeah,
friend.
that was before. I was very young at that time, and I must have been like 7 years old.
Yeah.
And I went like at 7 years old. You get sent to the convenience store to buy stuff. Like so. It's like I said, the kids are of service in Guatemala. They put you to they put you to do stuff early on,
Mm.
and so I just happened to be at the store. I can't even remember what the heck they sent me to go buy, but
I think your mom said tortillas or
I
something
have
like
no
that.
idea what the hell they sent me to go buy. But I was just at the wrong place at the wrong time. And there was a couple of thieves that just rolled up in there. They had machetes and they freaking locked up the doors, and they were being chased by the cops. And so um, I just remember they like picking me up, and like waving me on the window, like, "Hey, you guys better clear the area because we're gonna hurt him if you guys just don't leave." You know what I mean? And so um, they sat me back down, and they're over here on the window negotiating. I could hear screaming and the background, like this desperate screams, and I didn't know who the hell it was. Like it's just like sounded like somebody was dying, and I'm just standing there, and this guy's negotiating, and I don't know what sparked the idea on my head to just go behind the counter, right? And there was a little like pathway to the behind the counter, and when I got to behind the counter, this guy is still over here, talking through the window. And I've always been a curious kid, so I just kind of follow that path to the back, and in the back I find a door, and I walk out the door and go outside and come around the front. And they were like, "The kid's in there, the kid's out here, the kid's out here." As I remember, and then the cops kicked in that door and put a beating on those guys, took him in. Uh, my great grandma was the one screaming like crazy. She was the one losing her stuff out there because oh yeah, she was my caregiver, my caretaker. Yeah.
And before you had gotten taken, had you ever heard of kids getting taken before?
I've I was not a stranger to seeing things. I mean, things would happen to kids all the time,
Yeah.
especially kids that you know are in the streets and whatnot,
Yeah.
sometimes stealing, and you know it was not unusual that kids would turn you know out like that. And I remember that we used to live by this dump yard, that was a swamp turned into a dump yard. Everybody basically in the neighborhood will go and throw their trash there, and you see dead dogs there. It's just a really bad smell, between the trash and the dead dogs, and sometimes even dead human bodies would turn out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that was just right down the street from where we lived, and so and that was one of the areas where when they tell you stay clear of there,
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the areas that they would say stay clear of there. But when you're a kid,
Like Simba.
you always wander off, and it's like they tell you not to go there. It's like you want to go see what the heck's going on over there, and so you end up seeing shit. But yeah, it's pretty wild. And it's sad because even um, recently when I've gone to Guatemala, because it took me 20 years to go back to Guatemala. I came here in '98. The first time I went back was in 2018, 20 years later. And, you know, it's so wild because there's still a lot of people there that I grew up with, and they, they just tell me stories about some of the other friends that grew up with me, that got smoked, and I'm like, man, really? And some of them end up being bodyguards of the cartel, and that's how they end up, in the game and getting killed and stuff like that. But there was about three of them that I found out had been murdered in that way because, they grow up in, much like my mom said, the lack of opportunities, right? And figure out a way to make money, take care of your family, and things of that nature. And so, they find an easy route, but very dangerous, and end up getting smoked. And so it was sad to see that some of the same kids that I grew up with, ended up smoked because of that. So and it is, and in 2018 when I went, I didn't notice it as much. Um, but this past time in 2022, I did feel not safe. I because I went by myself this
Yeah.
time, and man, everybody's packing heat. Everybody's packing heat.
But it was like that before you left too. What?
But back then there was just not as much. Back then you would see more like people with machetes and knives, and now everybody's packing heats, man. And people drinking and stupid, and having having a gun at hand,
Yeah.
and so um, I didn't get out much when I went down there. I spent Christmas down there with my grandma, and I stayed put, man. I didn't feel I definitely didn't feel safe.
I got three more Guatemala questions,
Yeah, it was.
maybe. Um, do MS-13 and the cartel get along?
Not at the time, and I don't know if they do now. I don't know what their dynamic is. I know at some point the MS-13 got so big that they ended up somehow muling or whatever for them, or um, but at the time and back in those days, they were still in their infancy. They were still just fighting over territory and stuff with 18th Street. 18th Street and MS-13 were like, it. And so they were just basically they would get wiped out by the cartel,
Yeah.
you know. But eventually, MS-13 also became organized crime, and
Yeah.
so and I'm sure the dynamic probably changed at that point. But I was long gone by that time.
Okay.
I was long gone by that time. I was already here in the States, and but now there's some Colombian influence in Guatemala, which I didn't. They're loan sharks. That's what they do. They
Yeah.
they they let people money and end up taking their property or killing them or whatever the case may be. And this is just a whole different environment anymore. So I I, I couldn't recognize that, the place that I grew up in, and it was a little sad because I always associated that place with my like happiness.
Yeah.
And I always thought, eventually I'll go back, and you know, and I'll feel happy again, right? Uh, but that place that I left behind 20 years ago doesn't exist anymore,
Yeah.
and so it was just a sense of melancholy, you know, where I'm like, oh man, what happened to this place? Type of stuff, and people have to live there, and then you do feel bad for the honest people that have to make a living there
Some
somehow.
survivor's remorse.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, you kind of do. You're like, wow, you wish you could do something.
yeah.
You know, you wish you could do something.
So for your some of your peers, I heard you say like some of your peers got into the gangs and all the hustling and all that stuff, and then
Hmm.
may have gotten or have gotten murdered or whatever.
Hmm.
Have you ever seen like somebody you just played with all the time just turned so far the other way that you didn't recognize him?
I didn't see, but I did hear stories, especially about one of my close friends that he became just like crazy, man. Like some of the stories that they would tell me and stuff that he would do was like insane, insane. Where he get drunk and he'll just kill somebody for no reason, type of stuff. There was a story they told me where he actually tied this guy to the back of his truck and dragged him, until he killed. And I'm like, that's not the guy I knew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's not the friend I grew up with. But it does, man. That environment sometimes ends up changing people, and especially if you're a kid and you get exposed to the wrong mentor. You know what I mean? Because that's what it is. You get recruited. People you don't know any better, and they just teach you to kill at a young age.
Yeah.
Put that hit in your hand and take a man's life, and you know. But yeah.
What's before we leave Guatemala, what's one of your fonder memories or a great story about you and your grandma?
Oh man. Uh, I think it's like the local fair.
Mm-hmm.
The local fair. Um, she would take me there every. Yeah. Now, you know what? I have to go a little back. I know I have to go back even farther. And this is when I first started going to school. Uh, I was attached at the hip with her.
Uh-huh.
I was a little boy. Now, mind you, my great grandma raised seven of us.
Mm-hmm.
I was the only male she raised. Uh, so I was her baby, man.
Mm-hmm.
She took care of me, and I was attached at the hip with her. So when I started going to school, I would cry. I didn't want to stay at school, and the first day of school, she took me and she stood by the window the entire time until I came down. And she will come back every recess and be at the gate just to just to be there. And whew, that's a memory that I'll always carry with me.
It's crazy how our parallels don't parallel so much. Like you could be over there taking a shower in the because you said your bathroom was outside,
Hmm.
your restroom was outside.
Yeah, we didn't even have like a head shower. I mean, we used to have a pila is what they call it. Like like this concrete base where water will pour into, and you have to get it and like
Yeah.
pour the water on yourself, type of deal.
See, at the same time, while you're doing that, I'm over here complaining about microwaving water and pouring it into a bathtub, but
Hmm.
it's a roof
Hmm.
over my head. So
Hmm.
it's crazy how it's like it just don't parallel like that. But we both kind of we feel like we're struggling. Well, you don't feel like you're in the struggle at the time, but until you meet somebody that's doing way better, and you're like, damn, I'm struggling. Why are we going
I,
through this type
I
of stuff?
think it's a struggle. It's just I think it's a difference between struggle and suffering.
Ooh,
You know what I mean?
you. I know what you mean, but you care to break that down for us?
Yeah,
I
I
like that.
mean,
Yeah.
so I guess the way you interpret your immediate reality, right? There's always something you can find to be grateful for. It's just whatever you decide to focus on is what you're going to see. You know what I mean? And I was reading this book here recently. It's called The Voice of Your Soul, and it was explaining that we have this reticular activating system. It's like in your brain, which is like an internal Google search. And so whatever you put in that search is what you're going to see more of. Sort of like when you buy a new car and you all of a sudden start seeing more cars in the
Yeah.
on the
Yeah.
road of like. And so it's like whatever you focus on is what you're gonna see more of. And even in a state of crisis, you can find something to be grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we lose that ability sometimes here in the States, and that's mostly because you're so used to the comfort and pleasures, where um, environments of struggle force you to find the things that are joyful. I don't know if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. No, it make complete sense.
Yeah.
Okay, now we can go back to coming across the border, coming, getting your passport, and all of that, becoming a citizen.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we're in the States, man. And I, uh, I reconnected with my mom in Vegas, you know, Vegas was where she was at. And I, I had seen her when I was 12 years old. She came to visit Guatemala, and that was the first time I ever met my mom. When I was 12.
Like talk and met
Like saw her
physically.
face to
Okay.
face. Yeah, I would have talked
Okay.
on the phone with her occasionally, but you have to remember back in those days there was no what's up. There was no,
Yeah.
we couldn't really talk over the phone all that frequently. And so I had talked to her, but I hadn't seen her. And she went to visit me when I was 12, so I met her for the first time then. Then at 14 is when I landed here in Vegas, and that was a crazy experience because you coming from a small town in Guatemala to Vegas, Nevada, bro. It was an immediate culture shock. Immediate, because I never heard of so many noises, of seeing so many lights in one place at one time. I mean, I immediately just I was shocked. I couldn't say anything. My mom was like, "How come you're not talking?" And I think I was just still in shock. And I was still in shock from what had just happened too, man. You have to remember, I left without saying goodbye to anybody.
Yeah.
I left my entire life from one day to the next without even having an opportunity to process, or saying goodbye to my grandma and my great grandma
At the age of
at
14.
the age of 14.
Yeah.
So that was weighing heavy on my heart. And it was that it didn't allow me to enjoy myself because I felt remorse. I felt remorse for having lived them, you know. And so, it was adjusting to the north, man. I didn't speak a lick of English. And my mom, she's always managed to live in good neighborhoods. So I lived in an all white neighborhood, went to an all white school, and I didn't speak a word of English. They didn't even have English as a second language. And the school that I went to, they don't know what to do with me. I just remember. I mean, I almost started school right away. Not even a week after I landed, I was basically already enrolled in school and going. I don't know if in the late '90s, that the thing was like, baggy jeans
Yeah.
and baggy clothes, saggy clothes and stuff like that. Well, I was raised to wear fitted clothes and tucked in shirt, and so I stuck out like a sore thumb. You know what I'm saying? So I was an immediate target, man. I was an immediate target.
But it was even like that at the white schools, the baggy clothes and stuff.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
yeah, yeah. And so I remember first day of school, my mom gave me this the schedule, and she said, "Hey, here you go, son. I'm gonna drop you off at the bus stop, and just wait for the bus. You get on there, and they're gonna take you to school." And so I get to school, I got this schedule. I have no idea where I'm going. You know what I'm saying? And so I remember trying to look for this classes, and I could not find them. So I just sat. I remember I sat at that patio and just gave up at some point where I was just like, I don't know, I'm just gonna sit here for now. And I had somebody come and find me, and somebody found me, and they were trying to speak to me, and I said, well, I don't speak English. That's the only thing I knew how to say. And they took that schedule, and they took me to the class where I was supposed to go. I get there finally, and I'm thinking, okay, so I found my group. I'm thinking, right, I found my group. I'm cool. I just gotta follow them because in Guatemala, everybody transitions at the same time to the next class.
Okay.
So I thought it was the same
Yeah.
over here. So when the bell ring, everybody starts dispersing. I'm thinking like, what the fuck? Where's everybody going? You know what I'm saying? And so and so I just follow a random guy, man, and end up in this random class, and they start calling roll. And at some point they ended up just taking me to the dean's office because they were like, yeah, we don't know what to do with this kid. And I'll never forget, man. This lady, this teacher, African American teacher, Miss Gafford. She took me in, and I basically stayed in her class the whole day, and she would give me my homework. She would try to her best to like teach me as much as she could, like drawing and pointing, and she would have a dictionary, and she helped me out for some time. She helped me out for some time. Shout out Miss Gafford if she ever hears this episode,
That's
man.
two black women. Because your mama said a black woman helped her. I think she said with her reading and stuff when she
Yeah,
was. Yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah. Yes, sir. Yes,
oh
sir.
black women. Yeah.
And man, and so it was the beginning of a long journey here in the States, man. I think in hindsight, I didn't know this, but in hindsight, that I developed social anxiety, man.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be seen. I just want to be invisible, But it was hard to stay under the radar because I was just so different, and that's when the bullying started, and I was terrified of Americans, man. I always thought Americans could fight, and so I wouldn't say anything, you know what I mean? And I would just take it sometimes, and and that went on for some time. I did ended up picking up on the language quite fast. I mean, within a year I was speaking English, but I had no choice because at school I was exposed to it all the time. In my neighborhood I was exposed to it all the time. At home my mom was married to an American.
Mm-hmm.
My brother and my sister didn't speak Spanish, so my mom was the only one that I could talk to for an entire year until I learned the language. So there wasn't no way around it. But a year later, I had to go back to Guatemala to bury my great grandma, and that was a hard hit. That was definitely a hard hit, because I just, I didn't get a chance to talk to her much during that year. She couldn't walk, so she couldn't go to the local phone office to pick up my calls. You know, story goes that she just became so depressed. She started deteriorating pretty quickly after I left. She had a stroke, and she didn't make it through it. But God knows why things happen a certain way. At the time, I didn't understand it, but I did have an opportunity to write a letter to her during that year. And because there's this lady that came from Guatemala to visit us, and so I sent her a letter, and I got to express everything I wanted to express in that letter to her. She didn't know how to read, so she would have my adopted sister read the letter for her. And I still hear stories from from my adopted sister that she would just be bawling, listening to that. And in fact, when they found her, when she had that stroke, she had that letter on her, you know
Mm.
and so yeah, I didn't make it on time. I didn't make it on time when I got there. They were praying the rosary, and I didn't have I didn't have the courage to look at her dead body. I didn't want to remember her like that.
I get you.
I didn't have the courage, so I didn't. And and I remember when shortly after I got there that we had to carry her. So we carried her to the because in Guatemala you don't drive the casket. You carry the casket
Hmm.
to the cemetery. So I helped carry the casket. I remember, grabbing some dirt and, saying goodbye. But, man, her death sent me in a direction that I just didn't didn't know it was gonna take. It just I started, drinking, smoking, getting involved with the wrong crowd, uh, and that was to come 23 years of drug and alcohol abuse for me. Um, but that's the way that I cope with it at the time. I didn't know what else to do. I found a false sense of security and substances too. So I started sort of loosening up and speaking English. Making friends and things of that nature, feeling accepted in a way. And you know, I always been a good student, so I never like at school was I always kept up with. Um, but I was not I wasn't doing anything good with my life, at the time. My mom, would struggle with me, and like she probably didn't know exactly what how to deal with it. I barely knew my mom. If you, I mean, I had been with my mom for maybe a couple, a years, and after this happened, and so
Did you
uh,
have any resentment in your heart towards your mother?
I did, I
Yeah.
did. I had to work through that, also, but I think part of what I ended up, doing drugs and all that stuff was because of that resentment I felt,
Yeah.
and because of the loss of my great grandmother, and so, um,
Was the drugs and the drinking your way of expressing it because you couldn't express it to her? You didn't feel you were at a level to where you could express that to her, or you would.
yeah, yeah, that's fair to say.
Yeah.
That's fair to say. I mean, and I don't know, at that point, I think I was pretty like shut down, where I was not even willing to express anything. I was just, and it's crazy because like when I came to the States, I had never even touched a cigarette or drink the beer or anything. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
I was a pretty good kid, per se, but I lost my way, man. I did, and it got bad. It got bad to the point where my mom just didn't know what to do with me. I got kicked out of the house right after I finished high school. And by that time, I had bought a little Ford Contour. I had a little Ford Contour at the time. I graduated high school in Oklahoma, and then we came here to Kansas City.
She said Oklahoma was rough too,
Yeah, see,
race
it
wise.
was rough for her. I actually didn't mind Oklahoma. I made some, some friends there. They were doing shit too, and so, because I was kind of already in that life, smoking, partying, and so, you put yourself in those environments, and you're gonna find some, a lot of it. So it was around that time, as I started exploring, like, music, hip hop, the whole hip hop scene and
Mm.
whatnot. So, you know, I was always more East Coast though.
Okay.
Yeah, and basically when we got here to Kansas City, and my brother kind of started getting a little lost too in that sense, and I found out that he was smoking, and so I was just kind of trying to keep him away from certain stuff because there's a lot of bad shit out there, and I probably just enabled him more too, because we ended up, smoking together and things of that nature. We got caught, and that's when my mom was like, "All right, like you're a bad influence on your brother. You gotta go." We got caught on a Saturday night, and she was like, "Pack your stuff and go." And I was like, "Well," I was like, "It's late. You mind if I like crash and leave in the morning?" And she was like, "No, because I might change my mind by tomorrow morning." And so I just packed my shit and I headed to Oklahoma City because I didn't have any contacts here. All my friends and contacts I had was back in OKC. So I landed there. I had $495 on my name. I always worked, and I always went to school, so I managed to graduate. I always had some sort of job since the time I got here to the States. I worked, and I was working at Blockbuster at the time, so I had a little money,
Mhm.
saved up and stuff. And I remember I landed and I got to OKC, and I hit up my boy, and I was like, "Bro, I got kicked out, man. I got nowhere to go." And he's like, "Well, man, I can't help. I can't give you a place to stay, but." It's like, "How much you got?" I was like, "What do you mean?" It's like, "Yeah, how much money you got on you?" I was like, "I got 495." It's like, "I'm gonna do you a favor." And I was like, "All right." And he ended up giving me a pound at the time for 495. And so that pound got me through some time. But I was a terrible dealer, man. I smoked my own shit.
Yeah.
But you know what? Because I had that, I always had a place to stay. Yeah, people were always looking to get smoked out.
Yeah. Yeah. In exchange for a place to
It's
stay.
it's
Yeah.
crazy, but I
Um,
I always had a place to stay, and I would sell some here and there. I ended up running out at some point, but I did get a job, started working, and I would crash at a friend's house. His dad was a ex um, Vietnam vet,
mhm.
and that guy was a godsend, man, because he was a very traveled man in the way that he would suffer from PTSD. Like he would wake up screaming in the middle of the night. I remember he run to the kitchen and poured 3 tequila shots, smash them, and then go back to sleep like nothing. But he was a good man though, because when I had no direction, he talked some sense into me, and he's like, "What are you doing out here, kid?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "What are you doing out here, man? You shouldn't be out here. You got more talent than this." It's like,
Mhm.
"Have you thought what you're gonna do with your life?" I was like, it's like, "Why don't you join the military?" He's like, "You should join the military. That's what you should do. Give you some time to think about stuff." He's like, "Stop hanging around with all these losers around here. You're gonna become one of them." And I was like, "All right." So here's the first one that kind of put that thought in my head, and I remember that year because there'd be times where I sleep in the car, like I and all my homies, they were there in OKC from San Antonio, because when they closed the base down over there, all they were all military, and then they came to OKC. So for Christmas, everybody went back, and I had nobody. I had a job where I had to go work, but then after work, I had nowhere to go. And so I went to the park where we normally go smoke out, and I would just go park over there. And I remember on Christmas Eve, I found myself at that park by myself smoking a blunt, and I broke down. And I was like, that's the first time when I had a conversation with God in a long time. And I asked him, I said, Father, just help me. I don't know what I'm doing. Save me from where I'm at right now. I'll try better. And and it wasn't shortly after that, man, where I just kind of started you know, getting this itch for going to go check out the military and stuff. And I ran into some recruiters, an Air Force recruiter at that. And he was like, "Yeah, he's like, hey, you got to pass the ASVAB, you got to do a physical exam, and just." I was like, "All right," and he's like, "You got to go to the library, get some books, you got to study." So I was like, "All right." So I stopped smoking. I spent most of the day at the library. When I was in the library studying, I was training, running, doing push-ups, sit-ups, and shit. And when I quit smoking, everybody deserted me. I at
Mm.
that point I had no friends. So I was like, okay, it's cool. So I went and took the ASVAB. I passed it. I did the physical exam. I signed the dotted line, and I went back to my friend's dad, and I told him, I was like, hey, I got accepted. I'm going to the Air Force. I leave in April. And he was like, good, good, kid. I'm glad you listened. And he was like, I think you need to go back home and make amends with your mom because you're going to be serving during wartime and you don't know what could happen. Take that from me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, all right. So I hadn't talked to my mom in months, bro. And I called her, and I told her, hey, mom, I joined the service. I'm leaving in April. And she was like, well, son, I'm proud. She was silent there for a while, and she was like, "Why don't you come home?" And I came back to KC. I got a job at Walmart. They were living in Liberty at the time, so I was doing overnight stocking at Walmart just for this last 3 months, just waiting to get shipped out, and just working, and my mom went and dropped me off at Maps, and the rest of it is just pretty much history, man. That's when my military career pretty much started.
What do you think that silence was?
I think it was maybe um, that she was hoping to get that call at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and maybe an answered prayer.
Thank you, God.
hmm
Thank you.
Maybe she had been praying for me all along, and
Mm.
um, but I had to find my own way, man. I really did. And I can't say that the military uh, helped me find my own way, but it did give me discipline, and it gave me it bought me some time to figure out things. I was still struggling with alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
In the military, I wasn't smoking weed or anything else, but I was still drinking pretty heavily. I mean, it's part of the military culture too.
Yeah.
But I traveled a lot during the military. Those 5 years went by pretty quick. It was post 9/11, so there was a lot of activity
Yeah.
around that time. I joined in 2003 to 2007. That's when I joined, and that's when I met my ex. That's when my oldest daughter actually was born during that time also as well. So by that time I had my own family and so forth. And I I think we were starting to get to a part of the story where that I never really told before. because my journey with drugs didn't end with the military. After my time in service, I fell right back into it, and this time harder and heavier. Um, I just always somehow ended up hanging out with people that would drink, and that always opened up the door to other stuff, partying and cocaine, and so that was just part of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
My boy, at the time, which I met down there in North Dakota, he was moving some stuff. He was in the game and pretty heavy in the game, and I didn't know how heavy. You know what I'm saying? I didn't know how heavy he was, but when he got taken down, he had 7 dope houses and a whorehouse that basically he got taken down for. Ended up fleeing here, going to Mexico, and down there he associated himself with the cartel. Ended up getting murdered and whatnot. But I don't know, man. At the time, he seemed like a really good friend to me. He was always like a good friend to me. And we will go everywhere together. I was with my ex at the time, and he was dating his sister. So the four of us always were going places. He had a lot of money, so he normally always cover everything and so forth. And um, yeah, I ended up leaving that scene because I was stationed in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And you would think, man, what the hell's going on in North Dakota? But you know what? The distribution chain makes it all the way over there. And they're big on meth down there too. And so it's yeah, it was pretty wild. It was pretty wild. I ended up coming back here um because me and my ex broke up at the time, and I just wanted a fresh start. And I came here. My mom gave me a place to stay. I was heartbroken. I was probably my first official heartbreak, and
Yeah,
how those
yeah,
land.
yeah.
So uh, my baby was already born at the time, and so I always told myself I wasn't gonna let my daughter grow up without a father, because I grew up without my mom or my dad, and I never wanted that for my kids. And so I was like, well, you know what? Let's try to make this work. She came up here, and we did okay. We did okay for a very long time. I ended up getting 2 jobs. I think as long as I was busy, I can stay clean.
Mm-hmm.
As long as so I was working 2 jobs at some point. Then after that, I'm like, man, I got to do something besides this, because this is like I can't work 2 jobs forever. So I'm like, I got the GI Bill. Let me see if I can go to school. But it was around that time that I met Rick. You know what I mean? And so we
Mm-hmm.
were, I was messing around with music. My brother had been doing his thing in music over here. We were recording, smoking late at night, dropping beats and things. And so that was some fun times. I can look at those times back with some joy, and
Yeah.
uh but I was like, I gotta get serious. I gotta do something. And so I used that GI Bill. I enrolled myself at Park University for business administration.
Mm-hmm.
And I buckled down, and I did my bachelor's degree in 3.5 years. I got it done in 3.5 years. I was working for a company in North Kansas City, where I kind of moved my way up through there. I was a manager by the time I was done there, and I transitioned to the corporate world with Cisco in operations. And I I ended up there for about 6 years. And when I was at Cisco, I was like, well, you know what? I should probably go back and finish my master's degree. So I ended up enrolling myself at KU. I'm a Jayhawk by default.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrapped up my master's degree in business administration with an emphasis on Lean Six Sigma. Uh,
Congratulations, man.
yeah, and I did that, yeah, while raising a family. I was still drinking. The drink was not really completely gone from my life. Every chance I had, I would still drink, and if there was an opportunity to do a line here and there, I would. And so I always thought, oh, I got this. This doesn't control me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You justify it in so many ways,
Yeah.
where you're like, oh, I got my stuff together. I'm went to school, I got a good job, and I'm taking care of my family and paying bills. And so it's this illusion of everything, like you have everything under control, and it's okay. Once I got out of my master's degree, I could tell that things were not okay, right? My, drugs continue to be an issue, and I remember this day, man. I so vividly, because I think this was like the turning point. Um, my brother came through and on a Saturday night, and I told him, I was like, "Hey, I'm going to church tomorrow. I can't, be getting all fucked up or anything." So he's like, "Oh no, man, I only got a six pack, all right." And so I'm like, "All right, cool, come in." And so was match a six pack, and we're like, "So we got 12 pack. It's still early, you know." You go and get the 12 pack, smash that, and you're like, "Oh, it's barely midnight," you know. Before you know it, it's like 1:30 in the morning, and you're hitting up the plug, Before you know it, you're up all night, And I was supposed to go to church the next day. I told my daughter that, and I was in no shape. I was in no shape, bro. And man, I had never felt so much shame in my life. I broke down. That day, I broke down. I broke down, and I just prayed a dangerous prayer, man. I said, God, whatever you got to do to take this away from me, I can't, you know. And that was in 2017, man. That was in 2017. And boy, does the Lord listen when you talk to him, boy. Because I mean, that was to come a process of sanctification that was going to be painful, man.
Yeah.
Painful. My health was the first thing that took a hit. It went to shit. My health went to shit. I couldn't do what I was doing no more. I Even if I wanted to, just would not. My body was rejecting it, man. Every bit of my being was rejecting everything that I had been doing. It just wasn't producing pleasure anymore. It was producing pain.
Mm-hmm.
And cigarettes had to go. Some of the harsher stuff went first, you know. Um, Weed had to go. Alcohol was the last thing lingering, man. And but that was a process of almost a decade, man, of going through, basically getting out every demon that I had ever let in, man. You know, and it was a lot. It was a lot of house cleaning, bro. It was a lot of house cleaning, and I had to, in some way, do some soul searching. Um, I in every way I could find, I don't know, some sort of meaning, man. Some sort of meaning. My marriage just started going to shit too. Um, and even through all of that, we started a cleaning business with my ex, and and we did pretty well. But yeah, my whole world was being just turned upside down, you know. So I I was just going through the process, man. I didn't know how long it was going to take. So you know, you don't know sometimes how to handle these situations, you know, because you don't see no end to it, you know.
Yeah.
You don't see no end to it, and I started becoming, you know, developing anxiety, depression, and on top of being physically ill. I mean, I was so bad that honestly, man, I was driving to the Mayo Clinic 8 hours north from here every appointment once a month because they couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I was just this shortness of breath, man, where I couldn't breathe, and they couldn't figure out what the hell was going on with me. I was desperate. I didn't think I was gonna get better. You know, at some point you start thinking maybe I'm better off dead. You know, at least I got life insurance. I'm gonna be all right if I, you know, if I go. And so you start contemplating these crazy thoughts, and you know, some of those thoughts get scary, man. Some of those thoughts get scary because you know you really get to thinking that you're better off not alive, and that's when I knew something had to change. And if I was gonna make it out of that state of mind, I had to change the way I was thinking. And you know, at some point, bro, like I cut out everything in terms of medication because I'm like, man, these people are not really helping me anyways. So I cut out everything. I was like, man, I was on like 5 different medications, man. I was on PPIs, on asthma inhaler. I was on anti-anxiety medication, depressants, and I can't even remember what else, but nothing was working. And actually, you know, to make matters worse, now I was getting ready to cross probably the hardest stage of my life, which is going through a divorce after a 20-year relationship.
Mm.
So I was physically ill, mentally fucked, and I was about to go through a divorce. Um, so I was at a point of desperation, man. I really was. Um, and my divorce was anything but smooth. It was rough. It was rough. So I did you know I think out of desperation I started looking for answers, and anywhere I can,
Yeah.
anywhere I can, praying, and it's like I was telling you before we actually started shooting. I feel like God has somehow um, delivered prophetic messages through people and things that I just could never really, you know, saw coming. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Um, and most people, some people will question the way I went about healing. You know, because it wasn't the traditional Western medicine route. That wasn't doing anything for me at the time. You know, so I had to look elsewhere. So I started exploring plant medicine. You know, my interestingly enough, my great grandma was an herbalist.
Mhm.
She didn't once take me to a hospital when I was a kid. She always used to cure me with plants. You know, and it's just like going back to the remembrance. You know, of kind of where and and being led, because I think at some point you just gotta surrender complete control and just go, man. Just go wherever it is that you feel like you need to go to get that healing. And for me at that time was in the mountains of Colombia. Yeah, working with some shamans. You know, I did some work with plant medicine out there. ayahuasca in particular.
Yeah.
And I that was an experience in itself. It's crazy because I had just gone through the separation. I'm in a very bad headspace when I decided to do this. My mom was against it to begin with. She was like,
The ayahuasca.
uh huh.
Okay.
She was like, this kid, this guy's losing his marbles, and maybe I was, you know. Um, but things just kind of lined up, in that way, where I felt that it was some sort of like calling, like almost like it was too synchronistic. Because I had been talking to this group that was going out there, um, because I had contemplated the idea, but I would have never gone really,
Mm-hmm.
because I just would have never gone if I wasn't at a point of desperation where it was just like a last resort type of deal,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I remember that this group was messaging back and forth, and one of the messages was from this 913963 number. But I'm like, what are the chances that somebody's going all the way out there from here? Because my number is at 913963. So I just kind of, my curiosity took me to call that number, and it was this girl named Sandra, and she's from Honduras, and I was asking her how come, why is she going down there? And she said, well, I'm going with my husband. My husband is a ER surgeon, and he lost a kid in surgery, and he hasn't been able to deal with that. And he did a ayahuasca ceremony in Costa Rica, helped him somehow cope with it, and now we're gonna go to Colombia and do a second one. And I was like, okay. I was like, and so she kind of gave me the like reassurance that I needed to hear, I guess, at the
Mm-hmm.
time. And I was like, well, I gotta ask my boss, because that was on a Tuesday that I talked to her. The ceremony was coming up on a Friday, and so I'm like, well, I gotta talk to my boss to see if he would even let me go, because I was working. He cleared me on the trip. I was like, well, okay, that's two things I've lined up. Let me see what
Mm-hmm.
the plane ticket looks like. I found a plane ticket to back and forth to Colombia, Medellin for $654, 3 days before the trip. I was like, well, it looks like I'm going.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And
Yeah. That's.
that's what I mean by, I feel like in some way I was being led and
Mm-hmm.
everything was just lining up for me to go.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom was nervous. I hadn't slept in 36 hours when I landed in Colombia, bro. I hadn't been eating well. I hadn't been sleeping good. Like I said, I had just gone through my separation at the time, and I was terrified. I was having panic attacks. I had a panic attack in the flight there, and I weathered it the entire fucking flight. Um, when I got there, I don't know who was going to be there, man.
Right.
I didn't know. Besides the people that were messaging that I had never met in my life, you know, I don't know who was going to be there or how I was going to get there, and so I was just kind of going with it. Um, Ended up finding the place. It was 3 hours away from Medellin in the mountains. Um, and to my surprise, it was a bunch of group of people that were from all over the world, man. There's people there from Germany, from LA. There's another guy from Arizona. There was somebody from China. It was about a group of about 13 of us. There was a Air Force vet there too, or a Army vet there that he was there working on his PTSD, and some of them had already done ceremonies before, others hadn't, and I hadn't. I certainly hadn't. I was actually the first one that arrived there, so I wanted to talk to the shaman first. I wanted to. I don't know, get some sort of peace of mind, like, some reassurance that I was in the right
Mm-hmm.
path. I don't know. And I remember going to this gentleman, and he was very quiet, but I'm over here spilling everything, and he was like, "I can't serve you a medicine." I said, "What he told me?" And I was like, "How can you tell me that? Like, this might be the last chance or my last option." He's like, "You're carrying too much."
Mm.
He's like, I gotta do something like a cleanse or something. And so I was like, "Oh, I'm already here." So one of my fears when I went down there was coming out of the other side of this experience and somehow my faith in Christ changing. Right?
Yeah.
That was one of those things where I was just like, man, I don't know what kind of door I'm opening here. I don't know what I'm doing. But when he started doing the cleansing, he did it in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and I was just like, and that just
Gave you some comfort.
it gave me some comfort. And he started playing the Our Father, and uh, and then he went into a language I really don't understand. But I think it's they're Christians, but they're indigenous,
Mm-hmm.
and so they also work with Mother Earth and so forth, and so with the elements and things of that nature. Uh, and I just remember feeling a little lighter after that cleanse. The ceremony was actually coming up that same night, and I asked him again if am I good now, and he's like, from this point on now you choose your own path, like. And I asked him again, and he said, "From here on out, you choose." He just repeated, and I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I guess." And so I'm like, "Well, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." So I stayed. I Medicine was served that night, and um, man, that experience is something else, bro. It really was.
In a great way.
It
Good
it
way.
was it was very it was a very painful experience.
Oh, right.
It shocked me to my core. It really did. Um, in ways that I haven't felt that level of discomfort and pain, and it was 8 hours of nothing but, and it was mostly feelings. It was like so I remember just feeling everything that I once made other people feel. It's almost like I felt my great grandma's sadness when I left. I felt my mom's worry. I felt my daughter's disappointment, and I felt my ex's betrayal, and that it like very in a very tangible way, and uh, and it all hit at once too. So that it just brought me down to my knees, and I basically stayed in a fetal position almost the entire journey of that night. So um, if it wasn't for this gentleman, this veteran guy that was there, I don't know how I would have made it, man. He consoled me the last 2 hours of, and yeah, I ended up making it through that journey that night. But I was like, there's no way. There was 4 more ceremonies to come, and I barely made it through the first night. I'm like, nope,
Would
no
you
way.
say that first one was needed though?
I obviously, I think so. Yes, it was, because in hindsight, um, I think what happened that night, and I didn't put it together until months later,
Mm-hmm.
was that I got a glimpse at my reflection through other people's eyes. You know what I mean?
Yes, sir.
That's what I feel I experienced that night, and why it was so painful. Uh, and I remember calling my mom the next day, and I said, "Mom, I think you're right. This was a mistake. There's no way. Like I can't." No, actually, you know what? I spoke to the shaman first because I remember I was mad, bro. I was mad. I'm like, how can you call yourself a spiritual leader? Like
Mm-hmm.
where were you last night? You didn't, because he said, Dennis, everything that you felt last night is what you needed to feel.
Mm-hmm.
He said I couldn't intervene with that process. And he's like, but he said lightning don't strike twice in the same place. Just give the medicine a chance to show you something else. And I was like, there's no way. I can't go through another night like that. But thank you. And that's when I called my mom, and I was like, Mom, this was a bad idea. I'm heading back home. And this was crazy because she was against this whole trip to begin with, you
She
know.
wanted to do it.
And she said, "Son, you went down there to find something.
Mm-hmm.
Now you find it, you know." So I did, man. I stayed another night. I was antsy, man, because I'm like, I knew what had happened the night before, so I'm like, I'm nervous. And but this time was a different experience. I experienced a sense of peace that I hadn't felt since I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Just in short, in 8 hours you experience a lot, but I experienced what peace felt like, and I just remember wanting to contemplate it and sit there, man. And I did, the rest of the ceremonies. In the end, in one of those ceremonies, I had a conversation with myself, where I was telling myself some good game, man. He gave me my values uh, that I now carry. Um, gave me reassurance of things were gonna be all right. And yeah, it was. I know it sounds crazy, but it was a very much. It was very much real for me at the time.
Yeah.
And the very last ceremony was nothing short of a ego death experience. They call it. Um, it very much feels like you're dying, very much like you're clocking out. That was it. That was the end. And I remember coming out of that experience thinking I got an opportunity to do it again. I I might have lost everything, but I have my connection with my creator, and and I can try to do things differently now. But whatever I got left, all right. I did, man. I got back, and things didn't change immediately. Nothing really, had changed. The environment still looked messed up. The outlook on the future still, barely going through the divorce still, and you know, but little by little, I was done with the alcohol, um, done with with any kind of substances. I Things started more synchronistic things that started happening. And I'm gonna tell you something. This is when you know you're being guided, okay? Because the day before I went to Colombia, okay, um, I'm heading back home, and I deviated because I needed to stop by a gas station. Kind of lost track of where I was at, and I had to put the GPS, so it took me home an alternative route.
Mm-hmm.
And on that route, I'm driving, okay, and I see something in the distance, and I start slowing down because it's right in the middle of the road. It was a turtle. I was like, the hell is this turtle doing here? There's no bodies of water anywhere, right? And so I just kind of swerved around there. I hope that turtle don't get run over. I'm thinking, right? To do this ceremonies, you have to do a very strict diet, so you can't just be eating like stuff. And so I have been keeping up, a diet, and I stopped by um, supplement store to get some vegan protein bars to eat on, you know. And then there's at the front when I'm paying, there's this yard, and there's this yard, and I pick out a fortune, and it said, It doesn't matter how slow you go, as long as you don't stop." I'm thinking, okay. So I'm at the airport, and I'm, getting ready to get on the plane, and here in Kansas City. And there's this guy at a distance. He's got this turtle tattoo on his calf, right? And I'm like, what the hell's going on with this turtle? I'm thinking, right?
Wow.
When I'm down there in this, in the ceremonies, right? I'm talking to this guy, right? I'm talking to this guy. No, I take it back. That guy that I saw wasn't here in Kansas City. It was in like at the connecting flight.
Okay.
So it's like Florida or one. I can't remember where I connected flight to go to Med. And when I get over there, I'm talking to this guy, and out of the 13 people that were there doing the ceremony, the guy from Arizona, and I'm telling him about. No, he's telling me, he's kind of talking to me. I'm telling him my story. He's talking to me. He's like, sometimes you just gotta take it easy. It's just enjoy the journey. Slow down. And I'm like, that's what's crazy. You tell me that, because I told him about the turtle. I told him about
Mm-hmm.
and I told him about the guy in the airport that I saw with the tattoo on the back of his calf. And he goes, "You mean like this one?" And he shows me his tattoo. And it was the guy that I had seen in
Uh-huh.
Florida with that tattoo on the back of his calf. I mean, you tell me that there's not something
That's wild.
guiding you somewhere. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just been a pretty wild experience, the whole journey. But I won't have it any other way, brother.
What are you working through in therapy right now?
In therapy, I was working through what they call inner child healing.
Mm.
So that's basically um, working your timeline chronologically all the way back to the time when the trauma hit,
Mm-hmm.
and actually sitting there and talking to that child, and speaking live into them. And that's really what it is. It's identifying what it is that you're working, because it's that inner child that's like at the driver's seat if you don't heal it, you know? Because a lot of the decisions that you make are childish,
Yeah.
you know?
So, in closing, leaving us marked out. Can you Oh, you
Yeah, I
all
got
right,
it.
all right.
I actually got an indelible mark, but I wrote it. I wrote it. I
Um
got it on my phone. If you don't mind, do you think you can maybe pass me that phone right there?
that but well, before you get there,
Uh-huh.
can you tell us what it's like talking to that inner child? What you like some things you may have said to that inner child. And then
Yeah,
Della.
so the inner child that I was talking to was actually my 14-year-old self when I came to the States, that I found in that yard when I gave up looking for that class,
Mm-hmm.
because that's when I feel the trauma happened, right? It was that day. And I just told them that there's nothing to be afraid of. That the people that were around him not any are not better than he is. That I told him, I'm sorry for all the pain I caused you. I said, I'm sorry for all the pain I caused you. But I promise you that from this point on out, if everybody fails you, I won't. That's what I told him. I got you.
You feel like you're standing on that?
I'm standing on that.
Now,
Yeah. So I had to think about this one because, like I said,
love it.
it's been a journey, and I had to really dial in on it. It is actually was a great exercise for me to do because I feel like this is going to be how my life is ruled for the rest of my days.
Okay.
But it says, my indelible mark is one spiritual pursuit to understand and fulfill the divine purpose that God has designed for me. I seek to become more conscious, to break generational curses and disassociate myself from social norms, cultural expectations, as to live and serve with radical authenticity. I choose the path of conviction over comfort, denouncing complacency, apathy, and fleeting pleasures, in a quest of becoming a more righteous and wise man who can also embrace humility and surrender. My journey is grounded in collaboration and driven by the desire to create meaningful value as I pursue entrepreneurship, not for status or just to generate generational wealth, but to uplift those who come after me, alleviate suffering, and provide opportunities. I aim to form a beautiful reality that I can share with those I'm blessed to have in my existence from a place of intentionality, love, and purpose.
Amazing. You didn't even have much time to write that. I literally just told you about that yesterday.
Yeah.
It's amazing, man. You mind praying this out?
Yes, absolutely. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you. Thank you, Father, for all of it,
Thank you, Father.
for the experience, Father, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Thank you for choosing us for this experience. Lord, we ask you, Father, that you would send your Holy Spirit to guide us in this journey. Father, we're blind without you, and we ask you to please allow us to connect, allow us to empty ourselves so that your Holy Spirit can abide, so that we may think and act righteously, Father, so that we can exalt you, Father, Lord, so that we can honor you with every breath we take, Lord. We ask you. Father, we are desperate for you in these times. Let us be an example, Father. Let us be a living testimony of your word, of your goodness, of your kindness, Lord. There's still hope. There's still good, Father. And we trust everything that you're doing, Lord. Please, Father, suit us with the helmet of salvation, with the belt of truth, with the shoes of peace, with the chest plate of righteousness, with the sword of the Spirit, and with the shield of faith to step out into this spiritual battle, Father. Lord, send your warring angels to stand guard and be behind us, Father, as we step and try to do your work, Lord, in Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. The goal is to leave a lasting imprint on their minds and their hearts. We pray you've been indelibly marked.